Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from Not the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So, spoiler season for Murders at Karlov Manor has wrapped up, and you know what that means? Well, now we're going to be talking about the tiers of Murders at Karlov Manor. What are the most powerful commanders? What are the least powerful commanders? What commanders are absolute hot garbage from this set? We're going to go from, well, the D tier, which is the worst tier, all the way up to the S tier, and everything in between. So with all that said, let's jump into it. And just because I enjoy it a bit more, and I think some of you enjoy it a bit more as well, where I'm just kind of going off the cuff, I have not made a predetermined list. So I'm just going to be going through these commanders, starting off with the lowest mana value to the highest mana value, and placing these where I determine that they're at, you know, depending on the power, based off of my own perspective. Obviously, your perspective might differ, and that's completely okay. But yeah, I am not a EDH player, so not from that perspective. Kind of like, you know, casual, but like higher power casual, I would say, for the most part. Let's jump into it. Cost Eyes of the Glade, a 2/2 Dryad Detective in Naya for 2 mana. Whenever a creature control was turned face up this turn, deals counter to player, draw a card. Tap, turn target face down, attacking creature control face up. This one is interesting in that you can, well, get a good amount of card advantage essentially out of this. I mean, again, you have to actually turn a thing face up to do so, so that usually is a mana investment at the very least, like a tapping this and then maybe untapping it to untap other ones too to get them through. You need to be able to get them through as well. So there is card advantage built in there. But also there is cheating on mana value potentially on, hey, okay, I disguise this creature, I morph this creature, I get a creature face down somehow, then I flip it over. Yeah, there's some interesting parts to it. There's other powerful commanders that work with face down creatures a bit better in this set. So just start things off, I think I would put Cost Eyes of the Glade in the B tier right in the middle. Moving on. Lazav, Wearer of Faces. Lazav is back, a 2/3 Shapeshifter Detective for 2 mana in Dimir. When it attacks, exile target card from a graveyard, then investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, you may have Lazav become a copy of a creature card, exile with it until end of turn. So a good thing about this commander is that, again, it is any graveyard, so keep that in mind. Not just your own. It can be an opponent's graveyard too, which is nice. That being said, yeah, if there are no cards in no graveyards, and in all graveyards, then you're kind of out of luck. Chances are pretty likely, unless there is, like, maybe an enchantment in play that says get rid of graveyards, then also, like, you know, happens to make it so that cards don't go into graveyards. Yeah, that might be problematic, but for the most part, you're going to have targets for this, and you want those targets to be really cool creatures, so maybe milling your opponents, tutoring things into your own graveyard, whatever it's got to be. You can do some really powerful things with this one, and actually quite early. I mean, again, just picture like Entomb turn 1, turn 2, get this out, turn 3, attack, and also sacrifice that clue, and then all of a sudden you have a massive creature swinging at an opponent. Yeah, have fun with that. So this one, again, with the right kind of setup can be very good. I'm kind of leaning actually toward middle of the road, though, because there are just so many very powerful commanders from this set. Moving on. Alquist Prof, Master Sleuth, a 3/3 human detective of vigilance for 3 mana and Azorius, enters the battlefield, investigate. So again, you get a clue by paying X in Azorius colors, I guess I should say white, blue, blue. Tap, sacrifice a clue, draw X cards, gain X life. So that can be quite good for you. Basically a repeatable kind of Sphinx's Revelation on a commander, which is quite nice. Of course, with this too, I mean, once you're set up properly, you can probably do some pretty disgusting things with this, like Dramatic Reversal. Okay, untap all my artifacts, gain even more mana essentially than what I just used this for. And then also, yeah, I mean, untap this too. It's untap all non-land permanents. Then yeah, draw into maybe a card that can get you that back out of your graveyard, or another like untap all creatures one. Use Mana Dorks too. So you can actually do some pretty powerful things once you're set up. It does take some setup to get to. You do need to get clues in play. That being said, we're getting a lot more clue support right now. You're in pretty good colors to really use and abuse this untapping, and also take advantage of the amount of cards that you're drawing, and also life gain too. I think overall, and maybe I'm just doing this too well on this. I'm doing too consistent right this with all the Bs essentially. I'm starting off with yet another B, so we'll see how this goes, and I reserve the right to change these throughout, so we'll see. Moving on, Delany Streetwise Lookout, a 2/2 human scout that costs 3 mana in mono white. Creature control power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. If an ability you control with power 2 or less triggers, ability triggers the whole time. There's actually a good amount of creatures out there that you can benefit from that have, you know, power 2 or less, essentially, that have a really good trigger. You are more limited than other commanders, maybe that can double up things too, like, you know, an Elish Norn, essentially. It is nice that you can get your creatures through for the most part, depending, again, if you're playing against a player that has, like, a bunch of big creatures, cool, I get through on you all the time. If not, I mean, I'm not really getting through on you, and also you're probably just chump blocking me anyways, and I don't really have that powerful an army. You kind of limit yourself in that you're like, okay, I don't want to utilize like anthems potentially, but you could utilize maybe like combat damage triggers. It's an interesting commander. It is a powerful effect. That being said, being in mono white, I think really does limit it. I'm going to throw it in the C tier for now. Moving on. Etrata, Deadly Fugitive, a 1/4 vampire assassin with death touch that costs 3 mana. In Dimir, face down creatures you control have pay 2 in Dimir colors. Turn this creature face up. If you can't exile, you may cast the exile card that paying its mana cost. Whenever assassin you control is combination opponent, cloak the top of that player's library. So this is a commander that you can go in a couple of different directions with. You can actually kind of like steal your opponent's cards, and then like basically if they're permanents, essentially, actually it doesn't matter if they're permanents, you get to cast them as long as it's not a land, I guess. So you get to actually cast the card essentially by paying 4 mana. Or also you can, utilize your own like disguise type cards, manifest, whatever you need to do, essentially get powerful things out, cheat it essentially onto the other side of it. If you got like a training grounds that can really help with it, it does require some setup. I think overall, if I have to, I mean, you obviously can go Assassin Tribal. If I have to place this in one, it's not quite as powerful as some of the other B tier commanders I've already mentioned so far. I'm gonna throw it in the C tier, though there are powerful things you can do with it. Moving on, Feather Radiant Arbiter, there we go. 4/3 Angel of Flying and Lifelink for 3 mana and Boros. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell that targets only Feather Radiant Arbiter, you may choose any number of other target creatures that spell could target and pay 2 for each of those creatures. If you do, for each of those creatures, copy that spell. The copy targets that creature. And of course, copies of permanent spells become tokens. This one is an interesting commander. It definitely is. It's kind of like that Simic commander that copies things essentially and makes them permanents as well. And then also it's a combination of Zada, Hedron Grinder, but you also have to pay for that. The paying really holds this back, in my opinion. You're not in necessarily 2 colors that are very good at ramping necessarily, though obviously there's like treasure support now too. That being said, yeah, I mean, as opposed to Zada, you're getting benefits outside of just instant sorceries, though again, you have to pay for it. There's this kind of push and pull with it. And also you can target your opponent's creatures as well, but like then you're also targeting Feather with like things that might be a downside potentially, like an aura that you might not want to have on Feather. But that being said, you probably build in the deck like, hey, yeah, goated. It doesn't really matter if Feather's goated all that much. It's interesting. It's very interesting. I do think that it is a bit limited, again, compared to other commanders in the past like Zada. But I mean, again, we're working in a vacuum here. We're working just with these commanders. Compared to the other commanders so far, I do think this one is a C tier commander. Moving on. Krenko, Baron of Tin Street, a 3/3 goblin with haste that costs 3 mana. Tap, sacrifice an artifact, put a counter on each goblin you control. Whenever an artifact is great from the battlefield, you may pay red. If you do, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. It gains haste until end of turn. This, again, put into a graveyard from the battlefield, does not say your own. So that is quite a powerful effect, being able to essentially say like, oh, cool, like if an opponent sacrifices a treasure, if I sacrifice a treasure, if anyone sacrifices any artifacts, I am going to be, or if artifacts are destroyed, I'm going to be able to pay to make a lot of goblins. Nowhere near as good as original Krenko with that kind of stuff, but also being able to make your goblins deadlier is quite nice too, and being able to utilize certain untap effects like, threaten effects on your own Krenko to do that again. Yes, it is a very interesting commander. Again, it is mono red, so it's slightly limited compared to others. I think overall, goblins do have a good amount of support though. Yeah, let's throw Krenko. It's like a B-, C+. We're going to throw Krenko in the C tier for now. Moving on. Mirko, Obsessive Theorist, a 1/3 vampire detective with flying vigilance that costs 3 mana in Dimir. Whenever you surveil, get a counter on it. At the beginning of your end step, you may return target creature card with power less than Mirko's from the graveyard to the battlefield. They find out the counter on it. So if it would die, exile it instead. This is a commander that can be quite spicy. I mean, this is one where, again, yeah, I mean, you can go like really heavy into surveil. You can also go heavy into proliferate. Or you can just like throw an equipment on this like a Blackblade or Forge, and there you go. You just cheated on the power essentially. You're going to be able to cheat out whatever kind of creatures you want to be able to get into play for the most part. So being able to tutor things in your graveyard, getting them back out. Yes, they have that finality counter on it. You can utilize some things to actually move that counter around. There's not too many of those effects out there, but still, if you've got creatures that have, say, massive ETBs like a Sepulchral Primordial, only has like 5 power anyway, so it's pretty quick to get to that, or, some really big things, yeah, you can cheat them out as well. Yeah, I think this one actually has a good amount of potential. Again, you're in colors that can easily get things into your graveyard, and you can get that power up quite quickly, and once you do, your opponents are going to be in big trouble. You do have to get to your end step, obviously. You do have ways to double up on that trigger potentially. Yeah, I think this one's actually pretty powerful again if you build it the right way, and it's pretty low to the ground again. So yeah, I think overall actually Finality counter might limit it a bit more than I'd want it to. Let's throw that in the B tier for now. It's kind of like a B plus, A minus in my opinion. Next up, Morska Undersea Sleuth, a 2/3 Vidalcan Fish Detective, because that's a thing. For 3 mana and Bant, you have maximum hand size. Beginning of your upkeep, investigate. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, get 2 counters on it. This one I think had a lot of potential until that last part where it's like pretty bland and also really not all that powerful. I mean, yes, once you're set up, sure, you can get like 8 counters on with each tripper on the table, but then it's just like, okay, I just have like a Voltron commander. Typically, it's not going to be the most powerful type of build. Getting an extra clue each one of your turns is nice. No maximum hand size is nice, but again, I don't think that the last part really makes up for what the potential of this one could have been. Yeah, you got 3 colors, which is very powerful, but I think overall, again, because of what it's actually trying to do, I think it's going to be a C tier commander. Moving on, Teysa Opulent Oligarch. A 2/3 human advisor with death touch that costs 3 mana and Orzhov. Beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent lost life this turn. Whenever a clue you control is put in a grave from the battlefield, you get a 1/1 white and black so your creature token with flying. This ability triggers only once each turn. Why, Wizards? Why? Yeah, I mean, that last limiting part, if that wasn't there, this would be a much more powerful commander. That being said, they did not want it to be that way for one reason or another. Not sure exactly why. Again, yeah, I mean, if you get like a Quark Clan Ironworks out, sure, you get to sacrifice your clues haphazardly whenever you want. I mean, or any other kind of artifact-free sacrifice outlet, essentially, one that gives you a benefit. Yeah, this is definitely an aristocrat-style commander, essentially, and right now I am realizing that I have way too many in the B's and C's and nothing else elsewhere, but again, Teysa, I think, would be up there again, because aristocrat style can be very, very, very powerful. This one, again, gives you basically, again, end step, investigate, most likely if you're set up properly, which won't take long at all. If like a single Zulport Cutthroat and playing a sacrifice outlet, there you go. You get to your, essentially, hey, I get 3 clues. Yeah, being able to only utilize those clues, again, once each turn. It is once each turn, so with each tripper on the table, you can potentially make 4 spirits, so that is nice. I think because of that, I mean, I am going to put Teysa, again, with that requirement. It's just so unfortunate. I'm putting the B tier. B tier, Teysa, there we go. Atomic Wheeler Law, a 2/4 human advisor for 3 mana, affinity for planeswalkers. Flying Vigilance, whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you with planeswalkers you control, that player loses 3 life and you draw a card. That's a decent effect. So this is like Orzhov planeswalkers, essentially. It's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, you do have access to a good amount of planeswalkers. You also have access, again, I guess I would say, if you built this in the most optimal way, then yeah, it could probably be an A tier commander, because you're like, okay, I just get this out, I get my planeswalkers out, and then I just wrath the board again, and then my opponents can't get to my planeswalkers. I mean, you already have that deterrent, yes, so it's like kind of like a double deterrent that you'd be like, okay, I destroyed the board. Or also, if you attack me, you lose some life, and I draw a card. You could get that way. I'm just going to say, like, from my perspective, though, again, it's not how my play group plays. We don't play with, like, 15 plus wraths in a deck, which I did way back when, and that was a mistake. But Selene Dark Angel deck. Regardless, I think, like, kind of at its base level, it's nice. It's not all that special. Again, it doesn't really help your planeswalkers, other than, like, kind of, like, a slight deterrence from your opponent's attacking. But yeah. Let's just throw this in the C tier. Moving on, Tristani, 3 Whispers, an interesting commander, definitely an interesting commander, a 4/4 Dryad for 3 mana in Selesnya. Pay 1 and a green target creature gains death touch till of turn, pay Selesnya color, target creature gains vigilance on turn, pay 2 and a white, target creature gains double strike until of turn. This is very much like a political commander, it seems like, because again, it doesn't specify creature you control, which I think is pretty interesting. It's just, it's a little more limited than I like it to be. I mean, I do think you should get like some kind of a benefit for targeting your opponent's creature, like other than just the politics benefit, essentially, of being like, okay, cool, yeah, hey, if you attack with that, or while you're attacking, oh, I don't like that creature that's blocking, give it death touch, or like, hey, if you attack that player, you're gonna get through with them, I'll give it double strike. Being able to kind of make those decisions and make those deals, I think, is nice. I think like some kind of a benefit of like, if you target an opponent's creature, you get like an additional side benefit to it, I think could have been more interesting. But also, like, just, I mean, this one is the worst one I think we've seen so far. So I'm so sorry, Tristani. 3 Whispers, you are a D tier commander. Moving on, we've got Yurus Roar of the Old Gods, a 4/4 Centaur Druid for 4 mana and Gruul. Other creatures you control have haste. Whenever 1 or more face-down creatures you control deal combat to a player, draw a card. Whenever a face-down creature you control dies, return to the battlefield face-down under its control. If it's a permanent card, then turn it face-up. This is a commander that does a lot for you. First up, other creature control of haste. That is fantastic. Being able to just swing willy-nilly whenever you want, essentially, the creatures being very aggressive. Next up, combat damage to players equals card advantage for you. Now, it is limited. It does say 1 or more. That being said, with each combat, could be 3, 1 per each player, essentially, which can be quite great. Obviously, you also have extra combat spells in these colors, which is lovely. But the biggest part of this is definitely that, hey, face down creatures essentially get reanimated in a way to face up creatures. So you can go like a Gruul aristocrat style strategy, which can be very spicy, very effective. And there's some crazy things you can do with this, including some combos. So yeah, this is a very, very, very powerful commander. There's a lot going on with this one. I do think overall it is more powerful than anything else we've seen so far. It is not quite to an S tier, and we'll get to why here in a little bit. But Yurus Roar the Old Gods, you are an A tier commander. But now let's move on to Argus Cause, Spirit of Justice, a 2/4 Spirit Detective with double strike and vigilance for 4 mana in Boros. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to 1 target creature. If it's suspected, exile it, otherwise suspect it. This one is, I mean, it plays into suspect, which is something that we've seen obviously in this set, a brand new kind of, keyword mechanic, whatever it is. It's weak. It's pretty weak. It's like, okay, ETB, all right, or attack. Oh, okay, nothing suspected, cool. I suspect you. Ha ha ha! And then essentially, okay, I need to either ETB this again with a blink spell, which you have access to, you do, or also just attack, and then, okay, I suspect that same thing again. It's like having to double up on a target to get rid of something is bad, but also if you just have to lean super heavy into like all the suspect cards, there's only so many good ones out there too. So overall, yeah, this is a pretty limited commander, and how good it is a D tier commander in my opinion compared to the other commanders from this set. And the precons, moving on. Here we go. Ansrag the Quake Mole. An 8/4 mole god for 4 mana in Gruul. Just 4 mana for an 8/4. Oh, it must have a downside then, right? No. Whenever it becomes blocked, untap each creature you control after this combat phase, literal combat phase. Pay 3 red, red, green, green. Must be blocked each combat this turn in a Fable. My goodness, there are no stops on this. They literally put the combo on the card, essentially, where it's like, hey, as long as you can have this and something else survive when you're attacking, and you're having it block again and again and again and again and again, because this can force the blocks, infinite combats for you. Which means that if you have any other creature that can get through, any unblockable creature, whatever it is, you win. Or if you just have like trample on this, essentially, and get through with the damage, you win. All you need to do is like make this indestructible, make an opponent's creature indestructible. There you go. You win. Or, simple fog effects. There's certain fog effects that are like pretty specific. That's like, okay, no creatures but this one deal combat damage. So then nothing's dealing combat damage except for the one unblockable creature that you have. This is safe in combat, and it just keeps bashing up against another creature that's not going to die either. Again, this is low to the ground, super easy to set up. Sure, that activability costs 7, but you're in green. You've got so many ways to ramp that that's nothing to you. And there are a lot of spells that literally just combo with this and say like, oh, okay, cool. My commander is indestructible with something, and then I cast a withstand death on my opponent's creature. Congratulations, your creature's indestructible now. And then I come through. Or get a simple fog like Terrifying Presence. You win. So yes, because of the power potential of this card, Ansrag the Quake Mole, you are an S tier commander, and probably the reason that others won't get up there. Moving on, Kellen Inquisitive Prodigy, a 3/4 human fairy detective for 4 mana in Simic. Pay Simic colors. The sorcery adventure is Investigate. Pledge to land this turn. Flying Vigilance. Whenever it attacks or up to 1 target artifact, you control that permanent, draw a card. This one is pretty limited, actually, in my opinion. I mean, the best part about it is literally just, hey, you can just keep recasting this as an adventure that helps you ramp. There are very few commanders that are just like, hey, straight up just permanent ramp with a land. I mean, it's kind of like, oh, why am I Arixmethes? I was like, why am I stumbling on Arixmethes? Yeah, basically kind of like an Arixmethes, but earlier. It's not guaranteed ramp, and that again, hey, if you don't have extra land in your hand, you're not getting the extra land out. The attack trigger is not all that good. I mean, again, hey, cool, you can destroy an artifact. Woo! If it was yours, draw a card. It's like, don't pay for your clue or whatever other artifact you want to sacrifice. Yeah, pretty weak overall. Not the weakest commander that we've seen, though, again, because it does have that early ramp potential for you to get you ahead. So I'm going to throw it in the C tier. Moving on. Masker Girl, Known Killer. My goodness. A 4/4 human assassin for 4 mana and Black Menace. Creature control of Wither. Wither is back in a big way with this one. Whenever a creature opponent controls dies, if its toughness is less than 1, draw a card. Obviously, your Wither can get you there by getting -1/-1 counters on your creatures, or opponent's creatures, I should say. Black Sun Xanth, those kinds of cards can do that as well. Proliferate effects you have in this color as well. And of course, you've got cards like, Languish, which gives -4/-4, or like Toxic Deluge, which just gives an absurd amount of -X/-X. depending on your budget, obviously. But yeah, this one has the potential to draw you just an obnoxious amount of cards. Just a crazy amount of cards. It's like, hey, you wipe your opponent's boards, you draw however many creatures they had. That is just a crazy good effect. If this one was in more colors, I'd probably put it up there in the S tier. It is limited to just mono black. That being said, it's very, very effective, very, very good. A lot of power potential, putting up in the A tier. Next up, Nelly Bork, Impulsive Accuser. You're accused, you did it. A 2/4 human detective with vigilance that costs 4 mana and Boros. Whenever it attacks a suspect target creature, then go to all suspected creatures. Whenever one or more creatures opponent controls deals combat damage to one or more of your opponents, you and the controller of each of those creatures each draw a card. I mean, this one's interesting when it comes to potentially politicking and being able to convince players to attack elsewhere, to force that maybe again with goading, including with this potentially. Again, suspect is limited so far, and there's only so many cards that do it, only so many good cards that do it as well. Overall, not the worst commander. It's definitely better than the D tier, but I think it is definitely, in my opinion, a C tier commander. Moving on. Sophia Dogged Detective, a 3/4 human detective for 4 mana in Bant. Enters the battlefield, create Tiny, a legendary 2/2 dog detective with trample. Pay 1, sacrifice an artifact token, make a 1/1, or put a 1/1 counter each dog you control. Whenever a dog you control does combat to a player, create a food token, then investigate. This one, I think, is a good middle-of-the-road commander. You are limited to basically dog tribal or like changeling tribal to really make the most of this. You can also get benefits from sacrificing certain artifacts, and regardless, you're going to make a lot of food artifacts with this, and essentially being like, hey, cool, yeah, I hit my opponent, so I got a lot of food. Give double strike, hit double, get an extra turn, swing again, do what you need to do. Sacrifice those, makes your dogs absolutely massive. You got ways to get them through. You got 3 colors. I think overall, this one's probably more of a middle-of-the-road commander. Yeah, I mean, again, if it was like a different tribe that had a little more support, dogs are starting to get more support, yes, but like if it was like goblins, yeah, you got an absurd amount of support with that. This one, middle-of-the-road support. Next up, speaking of dogs, to sack Judas Hellhound, a 3/3 elemental dog with Unleash for 4 mana, which means that you can either have it come into a counter on it or it has haste. Other dogs you control have Unleash. Creatures control with counters on them have haste. Whenever it attacks, add red for each attacking creature. Pretty limited. Again, you're like doing dog tribal, but just in red. I mean, you don't have to go dog tribal. You're obviously benefited with that as well. And also with this Unleash, it's like, okay, you get the counter, and also, again, creatures with counters on them have haste. You're already getting that essentially. So, yeah. It is, I messed up on the Unleash. I was thinking Riot. You may have this creature on the battlefield with a counter on it. It can't block if it's a counter on it. So you're basically just like, okay, I'm just swinging perpetually. Yeah, I mean, you do get some mana from it. I do think overall it is a pretty limited commander compared to most, especially since it's mono-colored. I will say a D tier commander. Moving on, Vanar Evolved Enigma, a 3/4 Elf Ooze Wizard, because that's the thing for 4 mana in Simic. May have combat your turn, choose 1, cloak a card in your hand, put a counter each color's creature you control. Being able to cheat out essentially any card in your hand is huge. Even if it's just once on your turn, that is massive. You cheat into play, yeah, just a 2/2 with Ward 2, but hey, you are in blue, you've got access to blink effects, and all of a sudden you just flipped over an Omniscience on like turn 4. Yeah, this has the incredible power potential. I would say it's not nearly as like built in as Ansrag, but it's like right up there essentially with some of the other most powerful commanders from this set. You don't have to go with that, but yeah, the most powerful build of this is probably like cheat in giant things. Flip them over with blink, and then all of a sudden, your opponents are in massive trouble early in the game, and the game is over quite quickly. Again, you could like Blightsteel Colossus super early with this one. So yeah, Vanar Evolved Enigma, I'm going to be putting you up in the A tier. Moving on, Aurelia The Law Above, a 4/4 Angel with Flying Vigilance Haste for 5 mana in Boros. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card. Whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, 3 damage each opponent, gain 3 life. This is actually a pretty powerful commander with a pretty powerful effect. Again, basically, you're going to be incentivizing or forcing combat, like goading or just forced attacks, essentially. And yeah, probably using some like ghostly prison so your opponents don't come at you, essentially. And then being like, yeah, okay, with each trip on the table, if everyone's attacking with 3 creatures, I'll draw 4 cards, which is quite nice. Now, obviously, your opponents need to have creatures. You can have ways to donate creatures or ways to give them creatures, like a Lightning Rager kind of thing. Or also, yeah, just benefiting from your own. And then, yeah, when players attack with 5 or more, there's some punishment to be had. And then also, you get to gain some life too. So obviously, you've got ways to benefit from life gain, ways to double up or triple on that damage. It is nice. It is interesting. It is limited just to colors. It is pretty solid, pretty good. I'd say it's like a B+ type commander. It's not quite up to those A's. So I'm going to throw it in the B tier. Moving on, Tristani the Rage Mother. I absolutely love that name. A 5/5 bear for 5 mana in Naya. Enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature control, base power and toughness 2/2. Okay. Also, whenever creature control base power toughness 2/2 attacks, gets +3 with 3 until end of turn. Again, this is considering base power. So you can add on top of that with like anthems or +1 counters, whatever you need to do. There's a ton of creatures out there that have 2 power and 2 toughness that are so good. Just look up a list. They're very, very good. But also on top of that, you have ways to maybe make some tokens. Because again, this doesn't say non-token. You got some tokens that are 2/2s. Congratulations, those count as well. You're also in white, which is huge because you can blink this to easily get that ETB again to draw an absurd amount of cards. I mean, this is like, hey, enter the battlefield, probably draw like 10 cards at a certain point. Pretty crazy for like a 1 mana cloud shift. And then also give that attack trigger being like, oh, like my little tiny army is much bigger now. Again, which can already be bigger based on, well, combat damage tricks potentially, or like just anthems in play. Yeah, this is a pretty powerful effect. Gives you 3 great colors for this. I do think that this one is an A tier commander. Some crazy things you can do with this. I mean, you can even go hate bears and do some crazy things with this too. Next up, Ezram Agency Chief, a 5/5 Archon Detective with flying that costs 5 mana in Azorius. Enters the battlefield, investigate twice, pay 1, sacrifice an artifact, gains your choice of vigilance, lifelink, hexproof until end of turn. I will say that, yeah, I mean, I guess you could have like Tivit, you could have like some combos with it potentially. Like if you had like the Eldrazi Displacer plus like Fork Clan Ironworks, sure, infinite mana. Other than like that avenue, which is pretty specific and you really got to tutor up certain things to get there. You don't have too many tutors that can go get those things. This is just pretty meh in a way. It's like, yeah, you can protect it. Yeah, you can give vigilance, you can give lifelink. Those aren't all that great. Like the hexproof is the best thing out of those. But also like, okay, I investigate twice. Cool on ETB. Yeah, you've got ways to blink it. You got ways to get more of those. You need a good amount of setup, I think, to actually get a lot out of this one. It's definitely, I mean, like, you could go artifact tribal with it too. It's definitely like a D plus C minus. It's whether or not I want to put in the D tier. I think I'm going to put in the C tier. It's slightly above that D tier, I think. Judith, Carnage Connoisseur. My goodness. A 3/4 human shaman for 5 mana in Rakdos. Whenever you cast an instant or source spell, choose 1. Spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink, or create a 2/2 imp. When it dies, 2 damage each opponent. Every single one of your damage spells essentially is a board wipe. I mean, not just like single target ones, but like there are plenty of ones out there like Blazing Valley, which is like 1 mana, all of your opponent's creatures take 1 damage. Yeah, that is a 1 mana, one-sided board wipe that probably gains you 20 plus life. Absurd. Again, at the kind of pinnacle of what this commander can be, your opponents won't keep any creatures on the board ever. I mean, like indestructible creatures sure be ways to get rid of that potentially. Yeah, this is just a repeatable board wipe on a commander that also is like, okay, I got rid of your creatures. What do I do now with my spells? All right, let's make an imp army that I can probably sacrifice for value and also like, yeah, ping you all for a ton, maybe double that, triple that up. Ways to take advantage of the life gain from this commander as well. Yeah, I think Judith is definitely, in a lot of other sets is probably an S tier, but I don't think it's up with Anzrag. I don't think it is. I don't think anything probably is, but we'll see. A tier commander. Moving on. Marvo, Deep Operative, a 1/8 Octopus Rogue for 5 mana. Whenever attacks, clash with defending player, which basically means reveal the top card of each of the libraries. Whoever's got the higher mana value, essentially, right, gets the win of the clash, and the win of the clash only matters to you. Whenever you win a clash, draw a card. You may cast a spell from your hand with mana value 8 or less, paying its mana cost. Yeah, I mean, you can cheat some massive things. It does require some setup, but yeah, you've got access to ways that like, hey, you reveal the top card of each library or whatnot, or play the top cards the library is revealed. And then you also have mill cards as well to ensure that you know, okay, like, that player has less than me, so I'll attack them. I can get this commander through in a lot of ways. It's got a lot of toughness too, so you can cheat some big things. It does require some setup. It also gives you card advantage though. It's not overly powerful, but I think it's the right level of power. So I think this one is, in all honesty, probably a middle of the road B tier commander. Next up, Melik Reforged Researcher, a star weird detective that costs 5 mana. Is it power touch each equal to twice the number of in-source cards in your graveyard? The first in-sorcery spell you cast each turn costs the risk cast. That is a good amount of reduction. Again, only for the first one, but it's each turn. So instants are going to be big with this commander. The more you cast, the heavier it hits. Obviously, that being said, a simple Bajuka Bog can really shut you down, unfortunately, but you're still going to get that value, again, out of, even if your graveyard's dealt with. This is, I mean, I guess dealt with too is the problem as well, because again, this becomes a 0/0. So you are kind of like dependent on that graveyard. Really, because of that, I do think that this one, again, if it literally just had like, you know, a +X and it was like a 0/1, that would be much better because it can't just get taken out by a Bajuka Bog, but yeah, it definitely can. So I think overall, again, it is a good amount of value for you. It can hit hard when you're set up, but it is a C tier commander. It would have been B, I think, if it would have had it just 1 toughness, which is kind of funny. Next up, Nibm Guild Pact, a 6/6 dragon avatar for 5 mana in Wooburg, flying hexproof from multicolored. When it deals damage to a player, it deals X damage to any target. Target player draws X cards, you gain X life for X the number of differently colored pairs among permanents you control that are exactly 2 colors. Very specifically worded. Essentially what it means is, hey, how many guilds do you have in play? Cool, that's your X. So that can be a lot of extra damage, again, maybe to someone's face, maybe to a planeswalker, maybe taking out a creature. You gain a lot of life, but most importantly, you're going to be drawing a ton of cards with this. Of course, you've got access to all 5 colors, so you can also, you know, double strike, extra combat, whatever you need to do, really take advantage of that trigger. I mean, the way that I would probably build it is hard to deal with permanents, either that are indestructible, or that maybe have hexproof, or maybe that essentially, yeah, are just like enchantments or tougher to deal with creatures. So I'd go with like a lot of different guilds of those, getting them into play, and then, yeah, once you're set up properly, you get a certain amount of value out of this. Again, 5 color already just gives you an advantage over a lot of other commanders because you had access to all the cards. So I think overall, Nibm is a guild pack, not the most powerful commander out there in this set, but definitely up there in an A tier. Next up, Tolsimir Midnight's Light, a 3/2 elf scout with lifelink that costs 5 mana in Selesnya, enters the battlefield, create Voja, Fenstalker, a legendary 5/5, green and white wolf creature token with trample. Whenever a wolf you control attacks, if Tolsimir attacked this combat, target a creature an opponent controls blocks that wolf this combat fable. It's an interesting commander. It is one that you can get Voja back, obviously quite easily with a simple blink effect if it gets dealt with. You do need some setup to actually kind of like, it's like wolf tribal, okay, obviously. Not werewolves though, so keep that in mind. And you can force blocks, which is nice, but you do have to throw your commander into the fray to actually do that, which can be quite dangerous potentially if your opponents have enough creatures essentially block multiple, or not block multiple, but also block it, I should say. But yes, it does require some setup. There are other commanders out there that actually like, hey, I can choose any kind of blocks, which would be like, yeah, you don't block, or like you block this specifically. I think overall it's an interesting commander. It's not the lowest of the low, but it is definitely, in my opinion, not even up to a B tier. So I'm going to throw it in the C tier. Next up, Voya draws the Conclave, a 5/5 legendary creature wolf for 5 mana and 9. Vigilance Trample Ward 3. Whenever it attacks, you get X counters on each creature controller, X the number of elves you control, draw a card for each wolf you control. So you can go like wolf tribe, you can go elf tribe, you can go a combination of both. Yeah, you can draw an absurd amount of cards with this, just a crazy amount of cards with this. I mean, also you have extra combat spells in these colors too, so yeah, swing, draw an absurd amount of cards, get an extra combat spell, maybe an untap effect too, so you have like mana dorks as well, which are probably the elves obviously, so you can get more counters on them, you swing again. Once you're set up properly, an absurd amount of value, 2 tribes that are pretty powerful, especially elves. You got access to a lot of really good ones, but yeah. Being able to draw a ton of cards in combat, being able to just make your entire army, including this, absurdly large. I mean, you could just take players out with, you know, commander damage with this too. And it stays back for blocking as well. It's got trample, it's got word 3. A lot is going on with this. So I think Voja, not again to Ansreg level, but an A tier commander. Next up, Izoni, Center of the Web, a 5/4 elf detective with menace for 6 mana in Golgari. Enters the battlefield or attacks. You may collect evidence 4. If you do, create 2/1 black and green spire creature tokens with menace and reach. Sacrifice 4 tokens, surveil 2, draw 2 cards, gain 2 life. This one I do think requires a good amount of setup to do much. I mean, obviously you need some things in your graveyard to really take advantage of that ETB, which is nice, not too hard to do. You got self-mill cards in this. That being said, 4 tokens is a good amount to have to sacrifice, but of course, if you're playing at the highest kind of like value, the highest like budget, essentially, you're like, oh, okay, cool. I get ways to double this up, like doubling season in play. Cool, I get twice as many. And yeah, you can do some pretty broken things with this once you're set up. Probably do some infinite things as well, taking advantage of the surveil, drawing 2, gaining 2 life, maybe making some creature tokens while you're doing that, sacrificing them as well. It's an interesting commander. It does require a good amount of setup. Its mana value is quite high. To get a base level though, it is probably a C tier commander, not even quite to middle ground. Moving on, Rakdos, Patron of Chaos, a 6/6 demon with flample that costs 6. Beginning of your end step, target opponent may sacrifice 2 non-token permanents. If they don't, you draw 2 cards. It's an interesting commander. At a base level, it's like, hey, draw 2 cards in your turn, but it's a pretty heavily costed commander, 6 mana. That being said, if your opponents are set up properly and they have like things that they're okay with sacrificing, they're gonna be like, oh, okay, none of us are sacrificing things, or none of us are, letting you draw, and you get to sacrifice things. You're not always going to get the actual benefit that you want out of this. I mean, it's still a 6/6 flying trample for 6, which is just kind of scary these days to say, like, that's an okay commander. I mean, with what it does, it's interesting, can provide card advantage, can provide removal, but sometimes it's just not going to provide you exactly what you want, obviously, because the choice at the end of the day is in your opponent's favor. So we're going to throw that in a C tier commander. Next up, Kylox Visionary Inventor, a 4/4 Viashino Artificer for 7 mana, Menace Ward 2 haste. When it attacks, sacrifice any number of other creatures, then exile the top X card to your library, X the total power. You may cast any number of instant sorcery spells from on the exile card that pay the mana cost. This is potentially a like epic experiment on a commander. You're just like, okay, get creatures in play. Even like creature tokens whatever they are, just having a lot of power, like a Beast of Burden potentially could help you out with that. You can do some crazy things to get a lot of power into creatures, even some like combat tricks if you need to. But yeah, once you get this out, once you swing, and it can swing right away, obviously, it's got ward too, which is nice. You're essentially just like, okay, cool, I sacrifice all my other creatures, I cast maybe my entire library, there could be some combos in there as well, some absolutely crazy, again, epic experiment type stuff. Yeah, pretty powerful, does require some setup. I'd say overall, a B tier, middle of the road commander. And then finally, the Pride of the Hulk Glade, a 215 Crocodile Elk Turtle, because that's the thing, for 11 mana in green, which I should say Simic. It costs X less, for X is the total toughness creatures you control. Defender, 2 blue, until I've turned target creature you control gets +1/+0, and gains whenever this creature deals combat to a player. Draw cards equal to its toughness and can attack as though it did have Defender. Love it. It's a fantastic design. Absolutely love this card. It is pretty powerful, actually, because you can just keep recasting it probably for just one singular mana. On top of that, this has the potential to easily draw you 15 cards. How many other commanders can say that? Again, you get this through in combat, and you're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I just drew 15 for doing that. Obviously, you can also, take advantage of cards like Training Grounds to make this cost less activation. So you can utilize that, and then you can also activate it multiple times on the same creature to double up that draw, essentially. Other ways to double up draw, too. Yeah, there's some very powerful things that you can do with this one. I think that it is very much like a B+, A- kind of commander in my eyes. I think that it is. I'll go with a B tier commander to end it out. So there we go. So I think I'm pretty happy, actually, with the way that this list turned out. I do think nothing is quite up to S tier like Ansrag, because, again, it basically is just a combo in its own. Like, there's very little setup that you need to do at all to actually get that combo going. There's so many avenues to it, and it's just like, oh, I win. Congratulations. So yeah, it is one of those kinds of commanders where it's just like, it's hard to say anything else is quite there. There's some other incredibly heavy hitters again, like Yurus, Judith, all of them are just like, hey, we're also very heavy hitting commanders, but not quite to that S tier. I think it's on its own. Pretty happy with the way the rest of these turned out. There's not too many that are absolute garbage. Sorry, the ones that up in the D tier, but like, yeah, still some very interesting commanders. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on all these. What do you think is the most powerful commander of this set? Did I get it right? Did I not get it right? What did I miss on this episode? What did I not get correct? What should have been in this tier but was in that tier? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.